My husband stood before me, his face void of emotion. "If you won't listen to me, I'm considering divorce." Those words echoed in my mind, cold and self-centered. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I no longer wanted to be involved with someone who could say such a thing so casually. His words made it clear our relationship had reached its breaking point. My name is Amy. I'm 35 years old, and I've been married to my husband for 5 years. We've been trying to have children, but despite our efforts, we haven't been blessed with any. We considered fertility treatments, but ultimately decided to wait and see if it would happen naturally. My husband was adamant that if children weren't in our future, it was fine. "Living our lives together is enough," he'd said, which offered me some comfort at the time. After we got married, my husband lost both of his parents in quick succession. The grief of those losses consumed him, and we didn't have time to focus on starting a family. If I'm honest, my husband has always been a bit bossy. We met at work, where he was my superior, and he hasn't quite let go of that dynamic. In front of our relatives, he often calls me his foolish wife, scolding me harshly for any mistakes. This behavior hasn't changed since we married. Despite this, I can't say he's a bad person. He's had his kind moments too. As my superior, he gave me precise advice and guidance during difficult times at work. I vividly remember how he comforted me when I lost my beloved grandfather. It was a moment that deepened our relationship and led to our marriage. After we married, I quit my job to become a housewife, dedicating myself to our home. "Amy, I'm home," he says every night as he walks in after 9 p.m., exhausted from his responsibilities as a manager. I welcome him back, tell him he must be tired, and help him settle in. I tidy up his clothes and socks as he sinks into the sofa, too tired to respond. This has become our daily routine. I start preparing dinner so he can eat as soon as possible, but our conversations have become almost non-existent. He's always been a man of few words, but since his promotion, he's become even more distant. Still, I love and trust him because he was there for me when I was at my lowest. Losing my father in middle school, and my mother shortly after entering high school, left me in the care of my grandfather, who raised me like his own daughter. He was kind and warm, and I loved him with all my heart. When I started working, I dreamed of repaying his kindness by taking him on trips and enjoying life together. But 3 years into my career, he passed away from lung cancer, leaving me completely alone. The grief overwhelmed me, and I spent many nights crying. It was my husband, then my boss, who noticed my distress and supported me. His kindness during that time convinced me of his warm heart, and I was grateful to him. But as much as I've tried to support him, things have changed. One afternoon, our home phone rang. It was my husband's brother. "It's been a while, what's up?" I asked, surprised by the call. "I need to talk to my brother. Is he there?" I relayed the message to my husband, who was relaxing in the living room. As soon as he started talking, his mood shifted dramatically. "Really? Is that so? Are you okay?" His tone grew serious, and I couldn't help but feel concerned. After the call ended, I asked him what had happened. "It seems like my brother lost his job," he replied, disappointment clear in his voice. I was shocked. His brother is gentle, calm, and always humble, a stark contrast to my husband. He treats me like a sister and even stands up for me when my husband is rude. The news of his job loss was unexpected, and I immediately wanted to help. "Is there anything I can do?" I asked. My husband looked at me coldly. "What can you do?" His tone was dismissive, and it stung. "I was thinking maybe we could help cheer him up," I suggested. He sighed deeply. "You're really useless, aren't you? You might not understand because you lack social experience, but this is their problem. Saying we should help without understanding the situation is something I'd prefer outsiders to refrain from." His words were harsh, and I couldn't help but argue back. "Outsider? Aren't I part of the family too?" "You are my wife, but you have no relation to my brother. You're irrelevant, an outsider." His words cut deep. It was the first time my husband had been so aggressive towards me, and I was left feeling stunned. I understood that his brother losing his job was a big deal, but his reaction was completely unwarranted. After that, he became even stricter towards me. He started comparing me to his brother's wife, saying things like, "At home, my brother's wife manages to keep everything in order. What have you been doing all day?" His unreasonable behavior escalated, and our conversations became even less frequent. The distance between us grew. Swing and I began to doubt our relationship. One morning, I noticed him packing up the house, sorting through our belongings, and piling up garbage bags. It was unusual, but our relationship had become so strained that I didn't have the energy to question him. Unexpectedly, he spoke to me. "Get ready, we're moving." "Moving? What are you talking about?" I asked, completely confused. "We're giving this house to my brother and his wife," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "What? What do you mean?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was our home, the place we had built our life together. If we're giving away this house, where are we supposed to live? "We can think about that later. What's important now is that my brother is facing a severe hardship. He needs the support of his family." His self-centered manner was infuriating. He was making decisions without consulting me, acting as if his word was final. But I knew his brother would never want to kick us out and live in our home. They weren't like that. Why would my husband make such a decision? "If you keep resisting, you're no longer needed in this house," he said coldly. The next day, while cleaning his room, I found a completed divorce application. I was stunned. I never imagined that he was serious about ending our marriage. As I stood there in shock, something inside me shifted. I realized that our relationship was beyond repair. I picked up the divorce application and silently signed it, knowing that he would never expect me to actually file for divorce. That night, I confronted him. "Do you remember that this house isn't your property?" I asked, watching his puzzled expression. "This house belonged to my grandfather, and I inherited it after he passed away. How do you plan to give it away to your brother?" He was visibly surprised, fumbling for a response. Well? "Did you forget that fact?" I pressed on. "You started living in this house before we were married because you thought paying rent was a waste. I've been paying the property taxes on this house and land every year. You've never contributed, yet you decide to give it away without consulting me." He stumbled over his words, trying to justify his actions. But I had enough. "Once this application is submitted, the divorce will be official. We'll be strangers. It's impossible for strangers to live under the same roof." My calm declaration shook him. He pleaded to talk things over, but I was firm. "You were the one who proposed divorce, weren't you? I no longer have any love left for you." I carefully placed the signed divorce application in an envelope, planning to submit it to City Hall the next morning. My husband, now an ex-husband, collapsed to the floor in dismay, murmuring, "I never imagined it would come to this." But my heart was unmoved. He had become a stranger to me, and there was no reason for sympathy. Despite his tears, I remained resolute. Eventually, he left the house, resigning himself to the reality of our separation. Word of our divorce quickly spread at his workplace, and he began to face cold looks and rumors. His colleagues and subordinates knew about our split, and the embarrassment became too much for him to bear. A few months later, I unexpectedly encountered him outside a real estate agency. He had been waiting for me, and when I tried to ignore him, he followed me, forcing me to speak with him. "Amy, I've been resenting you for a long time," he said suddenly. I was baffled. "What are you talking about?" He explained that he blamed me for all the misfortunes that had befallen him since our marriage, his parents' deaths, his injury, and now his brother's job loss. It was absurd. His father had been ill before we married, and his